Arthur Dayne. He is the benchmark. He's the guy every other knight on this list grew up wanting to be. He had a sword named Dawn, a literal meteor metal greatsword that was as pale as milk glass and stayed sharp for 10,000 years. His most famous fight was against a psychopath. During the campaign against the Kingswood Brotherhood, Arthur went head-to-head with the Smiling Knight, a man who was the Gregor Clegane of his era, but faster and crazier. During their duel, Arthur's Valyrian tier blade literally hacked the Smiling Knight's sword to pieces. Instead of just gutting the guy while he was unarmed, Arthur stood there, let him go find a new sword, and then finished him off anyway. But the fight everyone remembers is the Tower of Joy. It was 3-on-7. Arthur was the last man standing, a whirlwind of white armor and starlight, systematically dismantling Ned Stark's elite Northmen. He had Ned dead to rights until Howland Reed stabbed him in the back. He died in the sand, and the era of the perfect knight died with him. Ryam Redwyne. He is the ultimate stat stuffer. He was the Michael Jordan of the Golden Age, a man so dominant in the joust that he once broke 30 lances against Clement Crabbe before the king had to force a draw. For decades, he was the face of the Kingsguard. But Ryam proved that being a god with a lance doesn't mean you can lead. He was named Hand of the King, and was so spectacularly bad at politics, he was fired within a year. He's a legend of the arena, but a footnote in the throne room. Aemon Targaryen. If you want to talk about the peak of Targaryen tragedy, you talk about Prince Aemon the Dragonknight. He was the greatest knight of his age, but he was trapped in a lifelong horror story. He carried Dark Sister, a Valyrian steel blade that was basically a laser beam, and he used it to defend his brother, Aegon the Unworthy, whom he absolutely loathed. Aemon is the king of impossible feats. When the Dornish threw him into a pit of vipers, he climbed out of that pit with King Baelor the Blessed on his back while being bitten by venomous snakes. He once fought a trial by combat for his sister's honor against a man named Morgul Hastewick, who claimed she was unfaithful. Aemon dismantled the guy to prove that the queen's name was as untouchable as his sword. But his ending is pure irony. Despite being the most noble man in Westeros, Aemon died protecting his scumbag brother from assassins. He died for a king who mocked him, hated him, and probably wished he was dead. Daemon Blackfyre. Daemon was a walking disaster for the Targaryen dynasty. He was a bastard who happened to look exactly like what the High Lords wanted in a king: tall, powerful, and unbeatable with a sword. His father, Aegon the Unworthy, knew exactly what he was doing when he handed Daemon the sword Blackfyre. It wasn't a gift for a favorite son. It was a deliberate middle finger to the actual heir, Daeron, who was a scholar rather than a fighter. By giving the conqueror's sword to a bastard, the king gave the realm a reason to start a civil war. Daemon spent the Battle of the Red Grass Field proving he was the warrior everyone wanted him to be. He fought an hour-long duel with Sir Gwayne Corbary that was basically a masterclass in Valyrian steel combat. He won the duel, but he lost the war because he couldn't stop being a knight. Instead of finishing the charge, he stopped to help his fallen enemy off the field. That choice gave Bloodraven the chance to rain arrows down on him from the hills. Daemon died in the dirt. Duncan the Tall. In a list of highborn knights, Sir Duncan was a knight in the same way a lie is a truth. He probably never actually took his vows, but he lived them more than anyone else. At nearly 7 feet tall, he was a massive target from the gutters of Fleabottom, who stumbled into history because he was too stubborn to let a royal prick beat a girl at a tourney. Dunk's style wasn't pretty. He didn't have Valyrian steel. He had reach and a punch that could cave in a helmet. His most famous moment was the trial by 7 at Ashford, where he stood his ground against the royal family just to protect his own honor. He ended up winning because he was willing to get his hands dirty, literally wrestling a prince of the blood into the mud. He spent his life teaching a future king how to be a human being, and in 259 AC, he ended it by holding up a burning roof at Summerhall with his bare hands so the next generation could escape. He died as he lived, protecting people who were smaller than him. Criston Cole. He wasn't any high-born lord. He was just a son of a steward who fought his way into the Kingsguard by beating Targaryen princes in the mud. He is called the Kingmaker because he was the literal pivot point of the succession. After years of being Rhaenyra Targaryen's favorite protector, something snapped. He turned into the architect of the Dance of the Dragons. When King Viserys died, there was a power vacuum. Criston Cole, as the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, used that influence to ignore the king's will and place the crown on Aegon II's head instead of Rhaenyra's. Beyond politics, he was a walking nightmare in the arena. At the tourney of Maidenpool, he dismantled the royal family's favorites. He knocked the legendary sword Dark Sister out of Daemon Targaryen's hand, and later broke the bones of Harwin Strong, the strongest man in the realm. He spent his life crowning a king just to spite a queen. Gregor Clegane, or the Mountain That Rides, was the ultimate proof that the title of knight is often a joke. He was nearly 8 feet tall, a monster in plate armor who swung a 6-foot greatsword with one hand. Despite being a sociopath, he was officially knighted by Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, giving the most violent man in Westeros a legal shield to commit atrocities. He didn't have legendary feats of chivalry. He burned his brother Sandor's face over a toy, butchered the royal family during the sack of King's Landing, and famously crushed Prince Oberyn Martell's skull with his bare hands. He was Tywin Lannister's personal attack dog, a man who used his status as a Sir to turn war crimes into orders. Before Beric became the undead leader of the Brotherhood, Gregor killed him once by driving a lance straight through his chest. Barristan Selmy. Known as Barristan the Bold, he is the gold standard of the Kingsguard, serving through the reigns of 5 different kings. While others were politicians or psychopaths, Barristan was a living legend who let his blade do the talking. At 10, he entered a tourney as a mystery knight. By 16, he unhorsed the Prince of Dragonstone. His greatest feat was the Defiance of Duskendale, where he went on a solo, one-man mission to rescue King Aerys from a dungeon. He didn't bring an army, he scaled the walls in the dead of night disguised as a beggar and fought his way out with the king in tow. During the War of the Ninepenny Kings, he fought his way through the Golden Company to reach their commander, Meleys the Monstrous. Meleys was a terrifying brute with a second, smaller head growing from his neck, and he was strong enough to kill a horse with a single punch. Barristan cut through a wall of elite sellswords and slew the 2-headed usurper in single combat, ending the Blackfyre threat forever. He is the one man even Jaime Lannister feared, the Hound. He was the antithesis of his brother Gregor. While the Mountain was a knight who acted like a monster, Sandor was a monster who famously refused to take the hypocritical vows of knighthood. His face was a map of trauma, half melted by his own brother over a toy. He was one of the most dangerous men in Westeros, serving as Joffrey Baratheon's sworn shield and later a member of the Kingsguard. His combat feats were fueled by pure, nihilistic rage. He famously held off the Mountain during the Tourney of the Hand and survived a brutal trial by combat against the undead Beric Dondarrion. Jaime Lannister. Known as the Kingslayer, Jaime Lannister was a prodigy of House Lannister and the youngest knight ever raised to the Kingsguard. His greatest feats are defined by elite skill and a controversial code. At 15, he held his own against the murderous, Smiling Knight. During Robert's Rebellion, he saved King's Landing by slaying the Mad King and his pyromancer to prevent a wildfire holocaust. Though he lost his sword hand, he proved his tactical genius by taking Riverrun without shedding a drop of blood. He remains the only warrior legendary enough to make even the mid-rebellion Eddard Stark hesitate in open combat. Gwayne Corbary, a legendary knight of the Kingsguard who wielded the Valyrian steel blade Lady Forlorn. During the Battle of the Redgrass Field, Gwayne's prowess reached mythical status. He engaged in an epic, hour-long duel against the rebel leader Daemon Blackfyre. Their clash was a symphony of Valyrian steel, Blackfyre versus Lady Forlorn, with sparks flying so thick they blinded nearby soldiers. Though Daemon eventually won, Gwayne's resilience delayed the Blackfyre advance long enough for the Raven's teeth to get into position. This single delay arguably saved the Targaryen dynasty from total collapse. Lyonel Baratheon. Imagine a giant in armor laughing in your face while he hammers your shield into scrap metal. That was Lyonel Baratheon, the Laughing Storm. He was the ultimate warrior lord who treated every battlefield like a party. His absolute peak was the Trial of Seven at Ashford Meadow. While everyone else was terrified of the political fallout, Lyonel was having the time of his life, smashing through the realm's elite knights and literally howling with laughter as he unhorsed them. But don't let the jokes fool you. His temper was nuclear. When the Targaryens broke a marriage pact with his daughter, he declared himself Storm King and started a rebellion. It took a brutal 1-versus-1 duel against the legendary Duncan the Tall to finally bring him down. Even then, he didn't just lose, he yielded with respect, forcing the king to give him a royal marriage just to keep the peace. Baelor Targaryen. He earned the name Breakspear at the tourney celebrating his father's coronation. At just 17, he dominated the field, unhorsing some of the greatest knights in the Seven Kingdoms and shattering so many lances that the name stuck forever. His greatest feat came at the Trial of Seven at Ashford Meadow. When a low-born hedge knight named Duncan the Tall faced execution, Baelor suited up and fought by his side. Imagine the crown prince stepping into the mud to trade blows against his own family for a nameless knight's honor. He was also a tactical genius. At the Battle of Redgrass Field, the rebellion was nearly won by the rebels until Baelor arrived with a massive force of Stormlanders and Dornishmen. He and his brother Maekar crashed into the rebel army and ended the war. Gerold Hightower. As Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, Gerold Hightower was the literal White Bull, a massive, immovable pillar of loyalty. While modern fans focus on Jaime or Arthur Dayne, Gerold was the veteran anchor who led them. He was the man who told a young Jaime Lannister, "You are here to guard the king, not judge him." His peak was his final stand at the Tower of Joy. Despite being shot through the hand by an arrow earlier in the war, he fought Eddard Stark's party to his last breath, dying as the ultimate symbol of a code that never bends. Victorian Greyjoy is what happens when you mix a Viking with a tank. He wears full heavy plate armor at sea, a death sentence if you fall overboard, because he simply doesn't believe he'll lose. His most brutal feat was the Battle of the Shield Islands, where he leapt onto an enemy ship, caught a blade with his bare hand, and butchered his way through the deck like a force of nature. Now, with a charred, sorcerous arm that pulses with dark heat, he's sailing toward Meereen to claim Daenerys Targaryen. The show basically took Victarion's physical intimidation and naval commander role and mashed it into Euron's name and personality. Brynden the Blackfish Tully. He is the gritty, tactical genius who gave the Lannisters nightmares. He earned his name by refusing a political marriage, becoming the black sheep of the family, and carving out a legendary reputation as a scout. During the War of the Five Kings, he was Robb Stark's eyes and ears, leading the outriders that set the trap at the Whispering Woods to capture Jaime Lannister. Even after the Red Wedding destroyed his house, he held Riverrun alone against a massive siege, eventually escaping by swimming under the castle gates in total darkness. Oberyn Martell. The Red Viper of Dorne was the most dangerous polymath in Westeros. A prince, a father, a sellsword, and a maester-trained scholar, Oberyn Martell lived a dozen lives before arriving in King's Landing. He famously traveled the Free Cities, founded his own mercenary company, and mastered the dark art of poisons, a dishonorable trait that made him a nightmare on the battlefield. His legendary status was immortalized in his trial by combat against Gregor Clegane. Armed with a poison-tipped spear and fluid acrobatic speed, Oberyn danced around the massive mountain, systematically dismantling the man who had brutalized his sister, Elia.